All right, everybody, welcome, good evening, and a very warm welcome to all of you. And thank you for joining us here today. This is an important conversation, and I'm sure it's going to be a meaningful one. I'm Dr. Sujaya Banerjee, and I'm the founder of the Women Leadership Forum of Asia. We do extensive work in the space of helping women actualize, helping women use their potential. We focus on building capabilities to enable women to contribute to the economy, contribute to their own lives, contribute to their own prosperity, and contribute to their own identities. So today's conversation is important, and as you already know, what we've planned today is we're going to present the award-winning film Devi to you. It's a short 12-minute film. It has been also listed among the top 10. Okay, someone's mentioning that he's not able to hear the audio. Just give me a check quickly. Suneet and team, are you able to hear me clearly?
Yes, we are.
So if any of you are having problem with audio, do check your own connections to be able to make sure everything's fine, right? So I'm going to encourage all of you to do a quick check. Coming back to what we've planned for you here today, we would be showing you the award-winning film Devi. It's been listed by various parameters as among the top 10 short films of the year. And we're delighted to present this to you. We're going to try and have the writer-director of Devi talk to you on the back of that. And then we have a very stellar panel that is going to have a discussion together with you. And before we come to that, I want to be able to spend the first couple of minutes, even as I give your co-participants a chance to be able to join in, to use the first couple of minutes to introduce you to the Women Leadership Forum of Asia. We're presenting this event together with Leo Girl Productions, which creates theater and film content for social change. Priyanka, who's the director and writer of Devi, is also the founder of Leo Girl Productions. But very quickly, to tell you a bit about the Women Leadership Forum of Asia, we're saying here enables crucibles for women leadership because we create capability moments and exposures and coaching and the rest of that to be able to enable women to create the right kind of skill sets and mindsets to be able to succeed in organizations. Our macro ethos is highly patriarchal, and so mindsets become a very significant part of enabling women to succeed. So we're not just about gender, and I know that our name, the name of the forum is a bit of a mislead. So most people presume it has got to do only with gender diversity, but I want you to know that the forum is highly focused on enabling inclusion within organizations for all kinds of diversity. So we as much work across generations. We had the very successful Millennial Max conference last year, where we presented research and books and a whole lot of insights, and we had awards for organizations that were doing a great job on integrating generations and enabling particularly the millennials to be able to contribute within organizations. We're great evangelists for persons with disabilities, special abilities, enabling organizations to be able to create opportunities to be able to integrate this diversity. We are champions for the LGBTQ community, and we promote a whole lot of communication around this, including encouraging employers to be able to integrate this very talented community. We're great champions for social-cognitive diversities, which is enabling organizations to be able to look across talent pools. We find it absolutely painful to see organizations struggle with talent in a highly populous countries like us, because we overlook so many talent pools, including one of the big pieces that we've been advocating to organizations is to look at people who failed. And this again has yielded huge results within organizations, expanded the pool of talent, and got organizations to start seeing talent very differently. We believe in the philosophy of 4 C's. Go back to the previous slide. I want to talk a bit about this. Conviction, courage, competence, and commitment. These 4 C's are very important for all the work that we do. It's very essential for us to be able to present what we do with a great deal of conviction. We help we help people through our capability building programs to develop the 4 C's model, which is conviction, the courage to do what is required to get done, build the competence to be ready, when the opportunity strikes, and most importantly, to remain committed to one's own identity and development through this entire journey. Move forward. We normally work, like I said, both on skill sets and mindsets. We operate out of 5 geographies, but what the virtual space has now done is made us available even across countries. So we do masterclasses, webinars, debates, discussions, and our idea is to be able to influence the society, influence and shape the society, to be able to think differently, to be able to reflect, to be able to widen their horizons, to be able to create a society that is truly equal opportunities. And organizations that are microcosms of the society, we want them to be champions and pioneers to in turn, in a kind of circuitous way, shape society by becoming role models for inclusion across diversities. Let's move forward. I must tell you that the Women Leadership Forum of Asia exists under the, aegis of the Learning and OD Roundtable. The Learning and OD Roundtable is one of the largest, most prominent forums of HR learning OD professionals. And we work with organizations to be able to help them drive impactful change and build learning organizations. We have over 25,000 members. Again, we have chapters across 5 cities, and now in the virtual space, we're available to people across India, and we've been doing some really pioneering work through the lockdown, including offering pro bono expert services to organizations. Can we move forward, please? That's our governing council of both the LNOD Roundtable as well as the Women Leadership Forum of Asia. Adil Malia is, veteran HR professionals with over 4 decades of experience. That's myself. I'm the CEO of the Capstone organization. I want you to note Srinivas Venkatraman of Illumine Labs, Dr. Akhil Basrai, who's on our panel here today, Rajesh Padmanabhan, who's also a senior business transformation leader, Dr. Prince Augustine of Mahindra & Mahindra, Manu Wadhwa of Sony Network, Rajeshwar Upadhyay, who's the Dean of the Academy of Applied Emotional Intelligence, and Rajesh Kamath, who's also on our panel today and is the founder of Chanakya Consulting. Move forward, please. Enhancing the inclusion quotient, which is what we work on across organizations. Move forward. We have the Women Leadership Forum of Asia Academy, which offers a whole lot of virtual programs. For those of you who have joined us today and are interested to know about our offerings, please connect with Prudel or with Rupali, whoever you spoke to in the team for registrations. I'd be happy to send you more about these wide variety of virtual programs on inclusion for leaders, a whole host of them for leaders, in fact, and a whole lot of them for gender inclusion, sensitization between genders, very wide variety of very creative, very engaging learning content, which is available online. So please connect with our coordinators to know more about the WLFA Academy. Move forward, please. Join the movement. Those of you who would like to be members, there's some incredible number of offerings that you get as a member of the Women Leadership Forum of Asia. We encourage you to reach out to Prudel or to Rupali should you want to be a member of the WLFA. Move forward. So those are some details, but I'm going to let you skip this. Reach out to the coordinators. They'll tell you more. We'll be very delighted if many of you join this movement. I'm going to take a moment to be able to tell you about Leogal Productions. We're offering this session in coordination, in conjunction with Leogal Productions. I want to tell you a bit about them. Move forward, please. Leogal Productions is a theatre and film production company. It has been doing some real award-winning work to shape the society. It's led by founder Priyanka Banerjee, and they do a lot of work in the space of gender diversity, women leadership, POSH, LGBTQ sensitization, and so on, using the power of theatre and films to be able to do this for over 170 organizations. They have a very impressive roster of clients, and they do a lot of work across industries in the space of diversity and inclusion. Move forward, please. Through the lockdown, through the COVID-19, they've been doing some very interesting work. And the reason I listed them is because those of you who are joining in the audience, you may want to explore some of these. You may not have thought of them yet, but there are other organizations already doing this. COVID-19 Chronicles, which is chronicling the stories, absolutely amazing stories that are emerging all around, stories of optimism, stories of courage, stories of great performance, great stories of high performance, stories of achievement, stories of battling and questioning the status quo, very outstanding stories of change and transformation that organizations have been experiencing, and Leo Girl Productions has been chronicling these stories for them. So COVID-19 Chronicles is something they've been regularly doing for organizations. I suggest you reach out to them if this is something that you require. Docu-feature on how it is that your organization actually managed or survived the COVID-19 lockdown. A lot of organizations have very inspiring stories, and they'd like to capture that so that more people across the organization, across locations, across countries, know more about how each location or each business unit managed and handled the COVID-19 crisis. What is unfolding around us is history, and it's amazing to be able to capture this. So Leo Girl Productions been doing some really outstanding work in this space. Move forward. The Sundowner series, which is actually fun, engaging theater and music and learning through theater and music. These are shows that Leo Girl Productions has been doing in the edutainment genre for organizations, enabling people to be able to join in with their families and have fun evenings together. So this is another thing you may want to explore. And then, of course, there's some really interesting conversation starters using theater. And these are amazing conversations around, conscious and unconscious biases, around true stories of women and their journeys of empowerment. Some very amazing stories, father-son stories, and so on generational diversity. So some very interesting conversations around a lot of the types of diversities and incredible stories of courage and inclusion, and attempts that organizations can actually make by being able to invest in these conversations to truly become equal opportunities employers. Move forward. And of course, we have some forthcoming sessions, which I recommend that you sort of diarize. The evolution of women through Indian cinema. So this is something that is coming up on the 6th of July. We're going to look at cinema as as a medium of mirroring the society, and figure through movie characters and songs and titles and what have you, the evolution of women through Indian cinema. This is a not to miss conversation. It also features a panel of very learned, very erudite people. So come in and join this conversation on the 6th of July, 5 to 6:30, Evolution of Women through Indian Cinema. Move forward. And then there's a third in the series, which is Evolution of Generations through Indian Cinema. And this time, this is on the 10th of July from 5 to 6:30. I recommend strongly that you come in and join this conversation. Again, this is going to be a series of movie clippings and a very interesting talk, which will be followed by a panel discussion. So do join us on the 10th of July as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm done with all my sort of preamble and with all my announcements for today. And now let's get down to what it is that we came together to learn. So let's move forward. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Priyanka Banerjee, the 23-year-old writer and director of Devi. Devi's been repeatedly listed among the top 10 short films of the year at different platforms, different forums. So I think it is my pleasure to hand over to Priyanka so that she can present her award-winning film, Devi, to all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Banerjee. It's really great to be here with a forum like this and to have Leo Girl Productions collaborate with the WLFA that has been doing such fantastic work in this space already. We do it through our stories, but they've of course been doing it on ground, and it's great to be here doing that. So I'm of course the writer-director of Devi and also the founder of Leo Girl Productions. So since Devi is the gateway through which we are getting into this conversation on women, patriarchy, and the journey to gender equality, I think the best thing would be to start with a screening of the film. I know some of you may already have seen it, but for those of you that haven't, or even if we just want to all refresh our memory and collectively experience it again, I think let's start with a screening of the film first, and then I will tell you a little bit about what went into making the film. And then of course, we'll get into the lovely panel that we've put together for you today. So Suneet, could you just help me with the screening?
हरे हरे तू माझ्याकडे बोलू नको मी सांगतो अरे टाक ना लवकर खेळ खेळ ती टाकलीस रे ती आता सत्ती टाकली अभ्यास केलास आता मी ही आजी राणी ती आणखी राणी गेली पळाली माझा राजा आला बघ तो बघ राजा आता ही तिरी तुझी तिरी आली काय बस टाकली मी राणी साहेब अरे तुझी राणी आली माझा राजा आला ना हरे
ऐसे केस के बारे में बात करने जा रहे हैं जिसने सभी देशवासियों के संयम को तोड़ के रख दिया है। हालांकि ये केस केवल 2 ही दिन पुराना है, लेकिन लोगों का गुस्सा आग की तरह पूरे देश में फैलता जा रहा है। हम यहाँ इस वक्त इस केस के विक्टिम के घर के बाहर खड़े हैं। हमें अंदर जाने की परमिशन नहीं मिल पा रही है। इस केस को लेकर देश की जनता कई महत्वपूर्ण सवाल खड़े कर रही है। पकड़े गए गुनहगारों को राजनेताओं का समर्थन क्यों मिल रहा था? आखिर इस तरह के गुनाह बार बार क्यों हो रहे हैं? साल दर साल सुरक्षा व्यवस्था में किसी तरीके का सुधार क्यों नहीं हो पा रहा है? पूरा देश इस वक्त अपनी
टीव्ही बंद करो
देवा आता हेच बाकी होतं
मावशी प्लीज सगळ्यांचा मूड ऑफ नका करू.
इथे सगळे लोकच ऑफ आहेत मूड तर ऑफ होणारच ना.
ऐसी बेतुकी बातें करके क्या मिलता है आपको मौसी?
मौसी सही तो कह रही है. It's getting way too hot for me here.
हॉट? ऐसी खुली जांघों में आपको गर्मी लग रही है? मेरे बुरखे के अंदर तो कबाब पक रहे हैं.
What? What?
Thighs. ज्योति जी आप जाकर देखो ना, इनका तो चलता ही रहेगा.
चलता रहेगा? कब तक चलता रहेगा? एक ही तो ढंग का कमरा दिया है हमको. आता ये रूम मध्ये किती लोकांना घुसवणार?
कितनी बार कहा है धूप बत्ती के बाद झगड़ा मत करो ना.
पण तू धूप कशाला लावते बाई? इकडे कोई देव नाही. हाँ
केबल चेक करायला गेलाय तो.
मैं आप सबकी शांति के लिए.
शांति बनता है ना. वो लड़की को अंदर नहीं आने देने का बस. इधर सबकी आत्मा को शांति मिलेगा. आता काय डोसक्यावर बसवायचं का काय तिला? दे.
तो वो कहाँ जाएगी? कहाँ जाएगी वो?
यहाँ एक सिस्टम की जरूरत है. हर कोई यहाँ नहीं रह सकता, वरना किसी को तो बाहर रुकना पड़ेगा ना.
पहली बार कुछ अक्ल की बात की है इसने.
जो अभी आए हैं वो बाहर रुके, हम क्यों जाए?
यहाँ की आबादी बढ़ती ही जा रही है आरजू जी. टीवी से तो लग रहा है हर रोज कोई नया आएगा. कितनों को बाहर बैठाएंगे?
सबको. वो हमारे क्या लगते हैं? हम सब एक दूसरे के क्या लगते हैं? फिर भी साथ रह रहे हैं ना.
हाँ, किसी ने कुछ पूछा थोड़ी. सबको यहाँ बकरियों की तरह ठूस दिया बस.
इतनी सारी लड़कियां रखेंगे कहाँ सबको?
दी आपने यहाँ कोई धर्मशाला नहीं खोल के रखी है. प्लीज आप इसको अपना टेंशन मत बनाओ, वो अपना खुद देख लेंगे.
Exactly, Jyoti. You're also a victim.
आलं सुरू यांचं इंग्लिश मध्ये.
मुझे इंग्लिश ही आती है. आप लोग मराठी मीडियम हो तो इट्स नॉट माय प्रॉब्लम.
मैडम जी हम कभी स्कूल ही नहीं गए. 12 साल में शादी करा दी, इसलिए तो हम नीचे बैठे और आप कुर्सी में झूल रहे हो.
तो बैठो ना. आओ बैठो इधर. मैंने कब मना किया आप लोगों को?
बस भी करो.
बात
आप भी. बाहर कोई रुका है, हम उन्हें क्या जवाब दे? ये अंदर बाहर वालों का बंटवारा कैसे करे? जिनके पापा भाई हस्बैंड ने किया हो वो
इधर रह सकते हैं. अपन सेफ है भाई.
नॉट मी.
मेरे तो रास्ते के मवाली थे। तो फिर उम्र से करते हैं, जिसका भी 25 से कम का था वो अंदर बैठो वरना बाहर जाओ।
तेरे को मालूम था ना मेरा मर्द 50 का है बनू, मेरी मरकटी
42 का था, 55 और 2 थे, कुल मिला के 110। तो मैं क्या घर चली जाऊं? दी
या तो फिर जिस तरीके से हम
ये भाई चीटी नहीं चलेगा, तुझे तो जितना जला दिया था।
शी
जला डाला। आप सब
गला घोटा था,
बियर बॉटल से फिर हाईवे पे फेंक दिया। पत्थर से,
चूरे से।
मेरा हादसे से नहीं, उसके बाद सदमे से हुआ था।
तो तू बाहर जा।
एक्सक्यूज मी
मैडम, इधर किसी को रोने का भी टाइम नहीं मिला था, तुम्हारा तो सबसे आसान था। दिखता है चाहे बाहर जा।
मौसी, छुरी नहीं चली, खून नहीं बहा, इसका मतलब ये नहीं मुझे दर्द कम हुआ था या तकलीफ कम हुई थी।
क्या बोल रहे हो आप?
So mean!
देखो रुला दिया ना।
मौसी, such a sometimes.
ये भी इंग्लिश बोलती है और कम से कम मुंह पे गाली देती है। तेरे जैसा नहीं।
मावशी काय चाललंय तुमचं? तुम्ही सर्वात मोठे आहात ना, तुम्हीच समजून घ्या।
ये तू कौन सी एग्जाम की पढ़ाई कर रही है जो तू कब भी देने वाली नहीं है? अब असली मुद्दे पे ध्यान दे।
आपका मुंह देखने से तो अच्छा है ना कि मैं इन मुर्दों की शक्ल मुंह देख लूं।
अभी लक्ष्मी चल, चला उठा। हाँ हम बाहर जाएंगे।
जाओ 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 जाओ, बाहर जाओ, अभी जाओ, उसको भी लेकर जाओ।
बस बस चुप, कोई कहीं नहीं जाएगा और जो आई है उसे भी कहीं भेज नहीं सकते। जितनी जगह है उसी में एडजस्ट कर लेंगे। वहां भी तो एडजस्ट ही कर रहे थे ना। यहां थोड़ी भीड़ में रहेंगे, लेकिन उन हैवानों के साथ रहने से तो बेहतर है।
ठीक है, लेकिन मैं अपनी गद्दी शेयर नहीं करूंगी बस।
ज्योति, प्लीज को कह रहा। किसी ने कुछ उल्टा सीधा कहा तो बैरी 1 हफ्ते के लिए रिमोट छुपा देगी, है ना?
याद है हम जब आए थे तो कितने डरे हुए थे। नमस्ते बोलो सबको।
हर 22 मिनट एक महिला का रेप होता है। 2018 में थॉमसन रॉयटर के स्टडी के मुताबिक महिला सुरक्षा के मामले में भारत सबसे असुरक्षित देश है।
Go ahead, Priyanka.
Hi, everyone. This is kind of the film that I'd actually made with the intention that once the film is over, it should leave everyone very internal and reflective. And I actually thought that it would be a compliment if someone didn't want to speak after watching the film. So I think it's kind of ironic that I've started speaking directly after it getting over. But I think that's kind of the context of today's discussion. All right, so I'll just start with just telling you a little bit about what moved me to make this film, because it wasn't so much just the topic of rape and sexual assault, although the film looks at that. But I think always with a filmmaker, there are many things going on subconsciously that finally compel you to write and make it. And when you make it, you're not so conscious of what those choices are or what those themes are that you felt so deeply about. But then when you look back at the film in hindsight, like I'm looking back at it right now, I think then at that point in time, a lot of things emerge and a lot of ideas seem clearer to you that, all right, this is possibly why I felt like writing this and felt like making it. So I'll just start with where it really all started for me in terms of its inception. I had actually been, like all of us, I've been familiar with a lot of the human rights violations that happen in our country, especially to do with sexual assault. And unfortunately, like the statistics in the film told you, every couple of weeks we hear about a new one. And those are the high profile ones, because as we know, a lot of them go unreported. So you actually hear of only the ones that the media has picked up, or that someone has had the courage to go and talk about. And I don't just mean rape or sexual assault. I mean, even any human rights violation, you only hear about them every few weeks, which are the ones that are reported. And, so for me, it actually was hearing not just one, but a series of one after another, I think, in my most impressionable years, starting with the Nirbhaya case, which I think everybody, of course, knows about, going into maybe the Shakti Mills rape case that more metropolitan people know about. And then I think the kind of the nail for me, the last straw, I would say, was the Kathua rape case that happened, which had to do with this little girl called Asifa. And I remember actually that after every single case I'd hear about, I actually had a very physical reaction to it. I think as all women do, because you can, with your imagination, really empathize what the person's gone through. So I think for me, with every case that has been that reaction, but I think when I heard about the Asifa case, I actually had a lack of a reaction. And I think a couple of hours after it, I actually forgot about it. And I was trying very hard to kind of not think about it. And I realized that I'm trying to, over time, as all people do, I'm trying to build an apathy to this news in order to build resilience towards it. Because, you know, if you hear it repeatedly or if you read up too much about it, it becomes really quite unbearable to think about. And so I think as a collective consciousness, society does try to, beyond the point, develop a sense of apathy as resilience towards the bad news that they're hearing. And this is what we call short public memory, which after a couple of months, you know, certain cases don't count for very much, you know. So when they first happen, you'll sign a bunch of petitions, you may post about it. If you're more conscientious than that, you may even go for a candle march or something like that. But beyond a point in time, public memory is short, and we tend to not dwell upon things that we can't do anything about. And I think this was an idea that always stayed with me subconsciously. I've been a student of theater. So I think, you know, I have been very familiar with absurdism and surrealism and different ways of storytelling than just actually your regular linear plot, which we're so used to seeing with films and with Bollywood. So actually, you know, this film actually for me came at a point where I was actually thinking about a different way of telling this story. And I thought about what would it be like if I took a very absurdist or surrealist kind of an approach to this. And I actually took all these various cases that I've heard about over a period of time and put them in one room in the form of various different characters that each represent a different case. And I've not literally taken any one particular case. These are all kind of just abstract versions of the various cases that I've heard about. But the idea was, if these all of these women were in one room, what would they say to each other? And I wanted it to be very realistic, because I think there is a certain portrayal in our society of women that have suffered sexual assault as these, you know, angelic beings that were brave hearts. And that really upsets me, because I do feel like they were just regular human beings that were not expecting that. They did not want to be brave hearts for us. They just wanted to get back home, or they just wanted to get through that particular activity of the day. They were not looking to be put on any kind of pedestal by us. So that was the idea. So as you'll see, the film is not so much just about rape, although that is the context. It's more about, I think, various themes that I think I have accumulated and experienced maybe as in my short period as a woman so far, and what I've really seen even the women in the generations before me kind of experience. It's an accumulation of a lot of that. I think it starts with, in the beginning of the film, if you've all noticed, the camera moves from one woman to the next, and you will see that they are different in terms of their socioeconomic class. They are different in terms of their appearance, in terms of their personality, their age. And I think personality is a very important one that I wanted to bring out, because I think while people do say that, you know, this one asked for it because of what she was wearing, or this one asked for it because of, you know, where she was, I think something that people also say, they might not say it as in that, in a very out there way, but they do say it, which is that she was too feisty, or she was too boisterous for her own good, which is why this happened to her. Which is why I wanted to show an amalgamation of all kinds of personalities, you know. So you'll see women who are demure, you'll see some that are submissive, you'll see some in the film that are actually quite out there and outspoken. And so you can see from the very first few minutes of the film that it actually can happen to anyone, from having looked at the gamut of women in the room. And the next theme for me that was very, very important in the film, just on a human level, was actually the apathy that they have all learnt over a period of time to do with their own tragedy or with their collective tragedy. So if you look at how matter-of-factly they talk about each person's tragedy, they're almost comparing it like it's statistics. That this person's age, let's say whoever's had a rapist that was below 25 years of age deserves a spot in the room. Whoever's rapist was related to them deserves a spot in the room. They've gotten down to the brass tacks of it, you know. That's how apathetic they've gotten in order to be able to deal with the reality of what happened to them. And I think that was a very interesting take for me. I think definitely the comparisons of the nature of how each of them was assaulted, as well as the comparison of each person's perpetrator, who that person was. I think, you know, to kind of tie into today's discussion, I think each character for me now, when I look back at it, actually represented a certain kind of woman that I think we see in society. So if we look at Kajol's character, which is the housewife, she represented the moral conscience. You know, a lot of films you'll actually see use women as the moral conscience of that film. They use them as the moral conscience of that character. And we can extend that to society, where we often say women are supposed to be the moral conscience. They're supposed to tell the man what's right from wrong and make him, make kind of appeal to that emotional side or to his conscience and make that happen. So she represented that, she was someone who was the peacemaker. She was, the silent sufferer in the room. She was trying to get everyone to get along, no matter how they were talking to her. And she was there as the obedient and the sacrificial woman, which is what we all have, in our subconscious. We're all very familiar with that idea. And that is why she was one of the central characters for me, because I wanted her to be there as somebody who has definitely experienced this. If you look at the Maushis, they actually all represent for me women that have been naturally disadvantaged. So let's say they've grown into a particular strata of society, and so they are naturally disadvantaged because of that. Like they said, they've been married off at the age of 12. And there is a great deal of anger and resentment that they hold towards women that were not naturally disadvantaged the way that they were. Because, they look at, you'll see the Maushis having maximum clashes with Neha Dhupia's character, which looks like a corporate executive, and the other with Shivani Raghuvanshi's character, which is the medical student. Because these are both women that are possibly educated, that have had a fair shot at everything in life like their male counterparts, which these Maushis have not enjoyed. So their maximum resentment, their anger, their frustration is actually directed at these two people. And you can see that quite clearly, in the room, because I do believe that the patriarchy quite often pits women against each other, because they don't realize that the phenomena they're trying to beat can actually be beaten if they all set their differences aside. But then the patriarchy has enabled it in such a way that you do see yourself as more disadvantaged or less disadvantaged than the woman next to you. The medical student actually, for me, is the most heartbreaking, I think, because she's a young person. She represents a millennial, a woman that if she had lived would actually have had a shot at possibly a life of equal opportunity, studying to be a doctor. And, you will notice every character in the room is doing an activity that they love doing in their lifetime. So each person is obsessively doing that thing. So you can see the Maushis playing cards because that's possibly what they love doing, when they were alive. And you see the medical student studying because that was possibly her ambition and that's where she wanted to get. So it's quite, sad for me when I think of that character more so than anybody else, because that is actually somebody who might have emerged and broken through a lot of the stereotypes that the other women in the room, would have otherwise had to endure in their life. The medical student kind of being, someone with the most prospects and still having lost out because of what happened to her. The corporate woman is, of course, the educated, employed, who we see as the privileged woman. And you'll still see, though, she's somebody who's possibly had to hold it together throughout, because everyone in the room has the least empathy for her. Because it looks like in her lifetime, she's had it easy. It looks like she got the freedom to do whatever she wanted to do. And you actually see she's the first character to break down and start crying when she's told something, because she's obviously holding on to so much of frustration about not inspiring any empathy from anyone around her, despite having gone through the same ordeal. And more so because she was not physically hurt. She did not die because of physical injury. She's died because of her mental state. So that all the more has stigma in our country, and people do not really empathize, with that situation as much. So as you can see, her possibly on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, she's possibly higher up, which is why she, inspires less empathy from the Maushis, who are still on the physiological survival end of things. Shruti Hassan's character is the glamorous girl. I'd actually written the character as glamorous girl. And I remember her asking me that, but what does this mean? What is her name? And I remember thinking that why have I just written her as the glamorous girl? Because I think that is a stereotype you have, of the wild party girl that lives life according to her terms and doesn't have to answer to anyone. And that was what I'd written her as, but I just written glamorous girl as the name of the character, because that's possibly the stereotype I was coming from as well. And of course, the last being Behri, they call her Behri literally, which is Yashaswini Dayama's character, who plays the deaf and the mute girl. The literal interpretation of that would, of course, be that she represents rural India and the rural woman that doesn't get counted in a lot of these conversations to do with, gender equality and patriarchy. I mean, even right now, we're having a conversation amongst a strata that I'm sure beyond a point will understand the message, whereas there is an entire section of the country where, this isn't even a conversation. It's not even an option for them. So she kind of represents that if you look at it literally. But for me, metaphorically, if I go into like a very artistic interpretation of it, she's actually mute because she doesn't have a voice, if you look at it in terms of that, and deaf because she's deaf to her own oppression. So she doesn't know that she's in a space where she doesn't have what everybody else has, or she doesn't have that sense of equality. And that doesn't just have to be a rural woman. I think we all know women in our lives who could be much far better off than they are, but they're just deaf to that idea, and they're deaf to that voice because of their own internal battle that they're dealing with to do with the patriarchy at large. So the film is definitely interpreted by a lot of people, I think, as a public service messaging to do with, against rape and sexual assault. But I think these are a lot of the other running themes that you may notice if you watch it a second or a third time. So my attempt was actually to pick a context like rape, but to actually bring a lot of these themes to light, over a point in time if someone were to watch it. So rape is, of course, the most extreme manifestation of these issues of patriarchy. But hopefully over time, with these kind of conversations, we will not have to come there very often, and we won't have to visit that subject very often. So with that, I think I'll hand over back to Dr. Banerjee, and we can carry on with our
Priyanka,
conversation.
and a round of applause for Priyanka, really, for a very well etched out movie, so profound, so layered, and you have a lot of effusive comments for your movie.
Wow.
And on the chat. So congratulations one more time for putting this together. So Priyanka is going to join our panel, but I want to be able to now turn over to the rest of the panelists. What is going through your minds? I'm going to request Ansu to please switch on the video so that people can see you. Thank you, Ansu, for joining us. I want to be able to get your reactions. I mean, you just saw a very, I think, a very moving film. And like Priyanka was saying that, I remember during the trial shows when we were looking at, when we watched the film the first time, everyone was just stunned. You got like no responses at all. And, we came out and Priyanka said that, actually that is the best response you can get to this film, because when you get people into that pensive mode where they're asking themselves so many tough questions. So I want to be able to dip into that and get your responses. Give me your responses on what's going through your mind. And I want a particular focus on, status of women within our society, less to do with the violence and the rape, because as Priyanka said, that's the context in which the film is made, but more about what you saw happen in that room, in terms of status, in terms of socioeconomic class, in terms of, essentially equality. I mean, what is it that's going through your head? I wanted to be able to get some reactions. Sheenam, can we start with you?
Sure. Priyanka, I saw this movie when we met the first time in Delhi, and I must tell you that I continue to be amazed as to how a young girl can think of a subject as deep as this and portray it so beautifully. Once again, thank you.
Thank you.
I think while I was watching it this time, Dr. Banerjee, I went through a training program in 2017 when I joined Dell. It's called MARC, Many Advocating Real Change. And, this program, we were about 25 of us in the room. And we did an exercise which said that, walk across the room if something like this has happened to you. And there were different things that came out in that entire exercise, right? If your parents are educated, if your parents, were able to afford a certain kind of lifestyle, if you had a vacation abroad when you were growing up, if you were more than 3 children at home growing up, if you lived in a joint family, and it portrayed the different kinds of privileges that one could have, or the lack of privileges that one could have. And we were in a group of people who were at Dell. So therefore, there were certain people who just didn't move at any question, right? So it goes to say, what's the kind of inequality, if I may use that word, that exists in the world, and how people have to survive and wade through that and actually try and make a mark. So it really takes a lot of passion, a lot of conviction in yourself, a lot of belief in yourself to actually, you know, change the course of destiny. I think women today are getting used to believing in themselves, and I think that's what is changing. The sheer confidence that we see in the new millennials, and in generations between mine and the millennials, is, I think, which very heartwarming, and I think that's what is going to change the history of diversity, at least in our country and maybe globally also. The other thing that I see is that, you know, I see men starting to understand what we've been talking about when we talk about diversity, right? And the entire concept is now starting to seep in. I remember when, you know, diversity became a fad and I was working in a company, not at Dell, but at a previous company. I used to feel bad if somebody said, oh, you got it because, you know, you were a woman, and you really didn't want that promotion because, you know, it would get tagged against you because of the fact that you were a woman. From there to where we are today, I think there has been a significant jump in the way we perceive diversity and the way we perceive talent. So I'm very, very hopeful that our future generations will not be talking about diversity as a subject.
Right. So, you know, I think that's all very well said. And, you know, we will come back to diversity and inclusion in organizations in just a bit, but I still don't want to lose the magic of the movie. So tell me what you're thinking. I think I'm going to try and pull in Rajesh at this point. Rajesh, top lines of what's going through your head as you just watch this.
Yeah, so this is the fourth time I've seen this film, maybe the fifth.
Wow.
And the feeling is similar. I think Priyanka has done an outstanding job. The portrayal of characters is fantastic. But I always think of why the name of the film is Devi. Okay. And my answer to that, and this is a conversation I have with him, my answer to that is because of one of the things that flashes at the end, which says that 80% of people in India worship goddesses. I think this needs to, and herein lies the solution. Because always, no matter what problem we have in society, and in Indian society to be specific, the solution has to be thought of. And if 80% women worship, 80% people worship goddesses, then they should know why they worship goddesses. I always believe we've lost the essence of India itself, and you know how passionate I am about that. Because of the ignorance of this, most of our problems exist. Because Devi itself, now when, look at the way society has moved. When you say Diva, it sounds modern. When you say Devi, it sounds ancient. They both mean the same. And they both come from the term Divya, which is both divine and a shining light. And this term has been given not to a character, though it may seem it's given to a goddess. It's been given to any energy which creates, nourishes, nurtures. And that's why we celebrate Navratri twice a year actually, but once when everybody is enjoying it. But are we just playing Dandiya, or are we thinking what this is? So I told Priyanka in an a chat before our session that I would love her to make a part 2. And I think the part 2 should focus on, or someone should focus on, what Devi really means and how we can bring that spirit back. Because people don't know what Devi meant, I think this challenge exists. So I'm very different in my thought as compared to most people who say, educate your boys and show them to respect women. No, that's not enough. I think Priyanka has done a fantastic job of showing how women are treating each other in that room. Yeah, more later, but I thought I'd just highlight this. The meaning of Devi is where the solution to this problem lies. Everyone needs to be enlightened on this.
Yeah, thank you, Rajesh. Thank you for bringing in that perspective. Pratima, you're really debuting on our, you're making a debut on our WLFA platform. I'm really excited to have you on board. Give me your reaction to the film. What's going through your mind? What connections are you making through this? I mean, clearly across socio-economic classes, the fates seem to be similar. So just want your reaction to that.
Sure. So first and foremost, Priyanka, congratulations for doing such a wonderful job. We need more like you who can really help us, ignite these kind of thoughts, not only with people like us, as you rightly said, who are quite privileged, but also a message to all the non-privileged women or even men across India. So thank you for doing that fantastic work. I've seen this umpteen number of times as a choice, not because I was on some panel. And every time it's really left me with a lot of goosebumps, very emotional, very introspective. And when I put the same context into the organization, I'm really not going to talk about what we do at RPG at this point in time, but a lot to do with what we ourselves need to do as women. Okay? The fact that you portrayed all the women out there completely, almost not sensitized to the fact that they themselves have gone through a situation or a trauma like that, and yet are not able to accept somebody new in the small space. Okay, it talks a lot about how we think about ourselves. How do we really respect ourselves? Are we willing to help people understand that we exist in our own identity? We don't need feminism there. We don't need to be more than men or less than men, but we just need to be ourselves. I think this film kind of pushes that identity aspect of a woman very hard. And if you've really seen, and Rajesh is a master in that subject, but I'm just going to touch a bit on that, Rajesh. But if you've seen history, matriarchal societies also existed, right?
Yeah.
Either it's matriarchal or it's patriarchal, and we've always been, kind of moving between the two. One of us had to have to lead, and I don't know where that need comes from. I don't know whether it's genetic, and there's a lot of research about genetics and chimpanzees, and incidentally how male chimpanzees end up literally almost raping or sidelining female chimpanzees in a certain period of time. And I don't know what that has got to do with the genetic study, but it only reflects you of the aggression, the consideration that woman is not equal or is not up to my mark, which is reflective in that study. So fantastic work, Priyanka. Really proud of you, and I hope to see more of you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we're going to come back with some more questions to you, Pratima. Ansu, I have to bring you in. Ansu is an evangelist and a deep activist for women's rights. I have to bring you in here. What went through your mind as you watched this film?
I think my first reactions were exactly what Priyanka was targeting at, which is, it kind of leaves you speechless with emotion. More so as a woman, it kind of impacts you a little more perhaps. But I have to
do you want to speak a little louder?
Sure. I have to say that very, very soon, my sadness or my deep felt pain very soon started turning to anger, which normally happens with me, when we come across these kind of stories. And in flashes of anger, it's always about the unfairness of the whole system, and the fact how unfavorably tilted it is towards one kind of species. Let me just use that word, which means that you have to be physically strong, and that's about it. Because it's not just about this physically aggressive male versus a female. It's about physically aggressive male versus nature. It's about this physically aggressive male about anybody that this person can overpower, anybody, anything, even like they think they're bigger than God, and they can create their own realities, and they can literally kind of rule everything. And I think it's this aggression and the fact that they this kind of people, they think that this is what makes them superior, and everything else and everyone else, be it socio-economically, be it gender-wise, be it special abilities, be it anything else, be it plants, animals, minerals, climate, it's almost like, because I can overpower you, I can,
I think we're having some problem with your sound. No, can't hear you at all. Actually, it's blasting in a very significant way, so we are unable to hear you. Sunita, are you getting the same reaction?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, I can.
So,
if you want, I
yeah,
can
this
try
is better.
without my. Is it better now?
Yeah. Just speak a little louder, and you should be good.
Okay, all right. So, like I said, I mean, I was just basically, this whole feeling of, they think that they rule the world and they can overpower everything, is what starts my agitation a lot. And I'm sure as we progress in the panel, we will discuss more aspects of it, because it comes out to play in every single problem that we are facing in our society today, be it in corporate culture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great stuff. We'll try and bring you back in. I'm going to, at this stage, try and get an audience poll going, because I know the audience is very effusive. There's a lot of comments there. I'll come to you, Akhil. Akhil, there are many more questions, so I will bring you into the conversation. I just wanted to do an audience poll at this time, so that we're able to get the audience in. Sunit, can we have the first audience poll in? And I know this is just to be able to cause some reflections here more than anything else. And I'd be interested to know if there are people who think differently. So great to bring you in on this question, because, to me, this is what struck me the most when I watched this clipping, when I watched this film, because, what was amazing was that the same fate did not escape them despite belonging to different socioeconomic cadres. So it's very interesting how you could be a bai, you could be a maushi, you could be a doctor, you could be, from any class in society, you could be, a housewife. You're not even, perhaps you have restricted movement and you're not even outside so much, and you can still be met with the same kind of fate. So I'm just going to ask you a question. Can we get the audience poll up, please, Sunit? Okay, so here's my first question to all of you. Do you agree violence against women exists across socioeconomic classes? Educated and successful women are as vulnerable. Do you agree violence against women exists across socioeconomic classes? Educated and successful women are as vulnerable. So let's try and see. You got a couple of seconds to respond to that. Sunit, can we see can you post what responses we've got from the audience on this one? Okay. So we have a staggering 94% that believes that, it's going to be the same no matter which socioeconomic class you belong to. You can be highly educated, you can be highly successful, you can still very significantly have the same challenges. You have a 6% saying no. It'd be interesting if you can post on the chat, what your perspective might be if you disagreed with this response, because we'd be very happy to be able to bring this in. This is meant to be a conversation. So I'm going to one more time remind the audience that please use the chat box to post your views and opinions. We very much want that. This is a diversity and inclusion discussion. So very welcome with your views and opinions, and your questions you can post on the Q&A. So I think with that, I'm going to move to my second discussion thread. And now I'm going to bring this back to the business world or the corporate world. And I'm going to say that if you look at the optics, and I know when I talk to a lot of men and I talk about inclusion of women in the workforce, rather representation of women in the workforce, a lot of people scratch their head and ask, what exactly is the problem? I thought this has improved dramatically, and it used to be a challenge a decade ago or 15 years ago. It's not a problem anymore, and most people have an anecdotal sense about what's really going on about these very serious issues in our society. So I remember somebody once in a conversation mentioning to me, I think the millennials are so smart, we have no problems with them at all. And a colleague of mine and I were talking about employability, because we'd gone out to a series of engineering colleges and we'd seen some very serious gaps in terms of preparedness to join the workforce. And there's a colleague of ours, very senior HR person, who was talking to us saying, but what is the problem? What are you all talking about? I mean, I see my son and I see his friends, they're all so smart. They're much smarter than we are. They're so articulate. They're so confident. And he was obviously talking about a group of people that went to an IB school, which is so rare, minuscule minority that can afford to be able to go to an IB school. And so he didn't quite get what we meant when we said that there are problems with English, there's a problem with business communication, there's a problem with being prepared really for being able to join the business world. So similarly, when it comes to gender, most people have an anecdotal sense of what it is that they've experienced with gender. And even recently, while talking to a group of leaders, I remember the reactions were, but they seem to be everywhere. I mean, the F&B staff in any restaurant are females. You go and try and check yourself in on an airport to board an aircraft, and the ground staff will be women. The people who serve you on the aircraft will be women. And the women seem to be a lot of women power around. Everywhere there are women. So what are you guys talking about? What is the challenge here? And that's why I'm going to mark my question by saying that the optics on gender representation is very is misleading, and for most people it's anecdotal, depending on which part of the world or which strata of society or where it is that they're operating from. Just to give you a perspective, we're still having only 26% representation of women in the workforce. This compares very poorly to global averages, which is about 49%. Developed worlds have over 80% of women represented in the workforce. We are behind countries like Chile and Peru and Bangladesh and Pakistan when it comes to representation of women in the workforce. I want to be able to get a reaction from all of you on, in the context of what it is that we just saw. Do you agree that despite all these optics and so much that the media talks about women or shows empowerment of women, obviously very great in highlighting, there's a bunch of there are usual suspects of women who've made it big in some area of of their professional life, and the same stories get rejigged all the time, and so people think, oh, but women do get opportunities, and who are they talking about? It would be the usual suspects, Indra Nui, or until recently Chanda Kochar, so just be the same names. So I want to get your reaction to this question. Do you believe that despite all the mentoring and despite all the investment in being able to create all these optics around women and commitment to women empowerment and the rest of that, what is the reason why the needle is not yet moving? Because there still seems to be some degree of representation that seems to have gone up in a couple of organizations. Most organizations are still opening themselves up to this agenda. It's not uncommon, especially as you hit mid-levels, the numbers drop dramatically. You practically have many organizations which have absolutely no females in the top leadership level. Give me a reaction to why this needle is not yet moving. And despite all the optics that we see around on women empowerment and women leadership, or the encouragement to want to allow women to be in society. Akhil, give me a reaction to this.
Yeah, I agree that the approach that we have taken to gender diversity is numbers, and it is very misleading. The visible numbers are not necessarily favorable to the gender diversity. So if you take a triangle and divide into 4 parts, large number of people, the one you mentioned about what you see them in restaurants or airline counter, they all belong to the last strata of the triangle. And as you go to the second strata, the number drops drastically. And at the top of it, today you can count on your fingertips. That's why you keep talking about Indra Nui and Chanda Kochars of this world, because there are so few. The whole idea is not to celebrate numbers. Idea is to celebrate which level of triangle women are placed. And that's the glass ceiling that we have lived with. And I have an angle on this, that it is not, there are a complete society, if you look at it, is sometime, and I like the word Priyanka used, apathy. That women have actually developed apathy, and something that it is our karma or it is our kismat. It's all right. It happens to women. Jessica Lal's murderer got free last week, and except for a page 3 write-up, nothing happened. It's all written in the karma here. As a result of that apathy, one thing that happens is that women themselves, and I'll be very candid here, I strongly believe in diversity, so I'll speak very openly, that in many organizations, women themselves are big block to other women's progress. They cannot, and I've got empirical evidence to show that they do not encourage other women to succeed. I'm not saying all, but quite a few occasions we have seen that happen. As a result, women have to fight the whole system On one hand, we call it patriarchy, which is very, I think, very biased way of putting it, that it's not only the men who are against gender, but even if it's a matriarchal department, same thing happens. It's a bias against gender, and the gender has accepted that apathy to say it is all in our kismat. So the film itself, very rightly, Priyanka did a fantastic job of that. Mentioned this, all right, it's not, we are destined to be in this situation. And this number thing that we talk about, actually we don't measure. And the moment you start measuring things, the needle will move. I remember looking at it when I joined IBM, we had something like 16.5% women representation. Okay, fortunately, not all at the lower end of the triangle. We decided that time to make it to 27% in 24 months. Some figure which just came out in the discussion. And we did achieve. We were not measuring whether numbers are going to 25 or 27% or not. We were measuring how many CVs have come, how many interviews were held, how many offers were made, how many offers were declined. The moment you go to granules, then you see the needle moving fast. Unfortunately, what we do, we celebrate 26% of the workforce is women, of which 24 must be at the lower end of the triangle. I think that mindset has to change.
Yeah, I think
decision-making level is where women should be pushed up to and given opportunity to rise.
Yeah, I think Akhil, you made some very valid points, because even while you're saying representation, even if you're looking at numbers, and a lot of organizations have the argument that what else can be your parameter at the start, you got to look at representation, whether you have representation. I think the definition of representation should be at which level or which cadre do you have this representation. Sure. And I think the other relevant point that you're making is get more granular about the data that you're gathering, which is how many CVs did you receive, and how many people, how much of diversity is also in your panels to begin with. Yeah. And so, you know, and how many people finally make it? How many did you hire? Not just how many did you invite? So I think also these very sort of granular questions to be able to finally hold people accountable for what's really happening. I think this is a perfect time to be able to ask one more audience question. And this time around, Sunit, could you help me with question number 2 to the audience? And do you believe the problem with gender empowerment and gender equality and gender representation in the workforce particularly has got to do with the fact that we've remained focused on representation and not inclusion? So can you just have that up? That we've remained at best. Do you agree our problem in India Inc. is both, which is gender representation, which is also low in very many organizations, but also gender inclusion, which is we've perhaps not been able to create the kind of cultures where women will feel integrated or even get integrated in key roles within the organization. So I want a response to this. Do you agree the problem is both? It's also not having enough numbers. And I told you that the total representation in India is about 26% to global average of 49%. And we're way behind a lot of developing countries, and easily with one of the lowest human development index for women in the world. So, and I'm going to urge you to not get carried away with the optics that you see around you in an urban city, because that's not the real representation of what it is that we have in terms of our situation to do with women representation in the workforce. Let's see what you got out of these responses, Sunit. Yeah, I think you got about 90% which agree with this, that it's both. And there's about an 11% which has a different point of view. Please feel free to be able to have that out on the chat, and we'll keep picking this as we go along. I'm going to ask the panel my third question. And this time around, I want to be able to take it to the whole space on, the whole situation of the lockdown. And the lockdown itself has required, for the first time for most organizations in India Inc. to work from home. Now this creates a level playing field for women, because for a long time the challenge really was can't leave home because you have little children, can't leave home because you're primary caregiver to parents or to in-laws, or can't invest in 4 hours of travel back and forth to be able to go to an office. Now all those impediments are out of the way, and there are perhaps opportunities for women to be able to start coming back into the workforce. We did one conversation at the WLFA on, is this an opportunity, and our organization seeing this as an opportunity? The answer by and large was yes, but it comes a little peppered, which is that organizations see this as an opportunity because they can get qualified women at a lower cost. So the cost arbitrage, notwithstanding being being an attraction, one of the most alarming things that we're seeing happening as organizations are opening up and beginning to get people back to work is that the women who were already employed within the workforce, their families and parents are extremely, or husbands are extremely reluctant to allow them to come back to work. So there are loads of organizations struggling to get women back to work. So it's the men who've come back and the women have still stayed at home. And these are large numbers of people. First of all, the numbers are dismal in terms of how many are employed. And I'm saying to top everything else, you now have another barrier. While you're seeing an opportunity of being able to employ women because of COVID-19, the ones who are already employed, the challenges that employers are experiencing is convincing their families to allow them, and I'm going to put the allow into the inverted commas again, allow them to start coming back to work. I want to get a quick reaction from the panel on this. Pratima, we'll go with you first.
Sure, thanks. So I have actually a different experience. I work in an industry which is engineering industry. So we've struggled to have about 18% women because women don't opt for such hardcore roles. Surprisingly, because we're in the power sector, all my factories, all the 5 factories are open from the 31st of March, which is just a week after the lockdown started. And incidentally, we have a lot of women on the shop floor who have been coming. Of course, we had to facilitate, we had to counsel at times, convince the family members. It was an effort, but we've been very lucky to see those women come in. Having said that, it's been a struggle to get them into core roles. And this is an opportunity when there's so much of flexibility, as you rightly said, to get women into core roles. So all that you spoke about, the frontline roles, the periphery roles, it's fine. But can we really start looking at sales roles for women? Can we really, and we do have few women, but we don't have enough numbers out there. Can we start looking at hardcore product development roles for women? It's an assumption that they are not engineering mindset. So these kind of experimentations is what I believe we should try. This is the right opportunity. Somewhere, a lot of men I have started to see have started doing a lot of household chores. Great change to my mind. On a lighter note, most of the men or most of the chefs are men. So I think they should now understand and accept as leaders or whatever role they are in whatever capacity they are in the organization, that roles are gender agnostic. It has got nothing to do with what your gender is. And if you are able to do that, I think this is the opportunity we should really make the most of by helping them understand and also creating such roles. But core roles, and I'm totally against periphery roles.
Right, good point. I think some very good points that Pratima made here. I'm going to go back to this whole challenge of bringing women back to work. And I'm going to ask a pertinent question. It's a nice question to reflect on. Do you believe within our society, we have a challenge between chivalry and chauvinism? Yeah, and I'm asking this in the context of, employers also being very protective about, like, let's get the men in first, we'll look at the women later. And also the families of women being reluctant to be able to let them come back to work. I've had several organizations tell me this, so I know this is a problem. And perhaps some of the panelists are lucky because they're leading some things within organizations. They perhaps don't have these pain points, but by and large within organizations, it's very dismaying to know that, the women find it difficult to be able to come back, whereas the male counterparts are back to work, because it kind of takes this whole movement behind. So I'm still going to ask this question. Can we have the third audience poll up, please? Do you think as a society within India, do you believe that we have a challenge of a confusion between chivalry and chauvinism? So do we believe we're trying to protect the women and therefore we don't want to let them do this or that or the other? And as a result, to be very significantly come in the way of their actualization, their ability to find an identity, their ability to be able to take on tasks as equals. Let's find a response to this. Suneet, what did you get? All right, you have a staggering 85% saying yes. There's a 15% saying no, and that's very cool to have an alternate perspective here. At this time, with the permission of the panel, I'm going to be able to take on some of the questions that have come up in the chat box. And I think there's some comments as well that I'm going to call out, because we've got some fabulous comments here. I'll keep calling these out with their names. We have Swapna Lekha Basak, who's saying, I disagree with the percentage of women in the workforce metric. Are we saying that is a representation of empowerment of women? No, no, no. We're talking about this as a representation of women in the workforce. This is for India, Swapna Lekha. Happy to give this to you offline. Yeah. Very good view about women are placed. Nalini Mehra is saying this to all the panelists. Geeta Verma, our culture is deficient in accepting women as strong persons. The workplace expectation is designed for men and their way of behaving. That itself alienates women. Swapna Lekha, I'm going to ask you to look up a nice article called Women and the Labyrinth of Leadership. And it talks about how women get valued in the workplace for communal behaviors and men are expected to demonstrate agentic behaviors. No prizes for guessing that leadership behaviors are equal to agentic behaviors. And therefore, women have a double whammy, because if they are good at work and they assert and are decisive and are powerful, they're seen as not like women, which are meant to be kind and soft and understanding and empathetic and the rest of that. Very interesting article, because it leads you to be able to arrive at an understanding of how you need to be like men, the behaviors that are associated with men, which are agentic, and the behaviors that are associated with women, which are communal. So you really need a world where you want both agentic and communal behaviors from both men and women. So I'm going to recommend strongly that everyone who's interested in this journey of understanding men and women and the behaviors expected in the workplace, do read Women and the Labyrinth of Leadership. This is very interesting. It's a Harvard Business Review article and is available online. Sonali Khatnani says, I completely agree, Akhil. I have experienced that, some of what it is that you were talking about. Lakshmi says, most women suffer from the imposter syndrome. So true, Lakshmi. And I must say that most men are not aware of this. They do not have empathy for this. And I speak to large numbers of leadership teams, and I can tell you that they're surprised that there's anything like this called the imposter syndrome. Interestingly, when you read up imposter syndrome, you will see that men also struggle with imposter syndrome. It's not just the women who struggle with this. We have a lot of agreement with Akhil. So I can see, Akhil, that the audience agrees with a lot of things you said. Sonali again says, we lack in womenhood the way brotherhood exists. And you couldn't be more right, Sonali. The whole spirit of sisterhood. And I can tell you that organizations are investing in this. There is one organization I know of which had about 57% women in the workforce. It's an IT company. And they were immensely proud about their representation of women in the workforce. Now, here's the challenge that they brought to us. And they said, what can we do to be able to improve this toxic environment? No female wants to work in a team led by females. So if you have a female boss, no woman wants to apply for a job in that role. In the IJPs, people do not apply for jobs that are led by women, teams that are led by women. The women will not apply for that. And interestingly, women don't want to mentor younger women who are smart. So women themselves don't want smart women in their team. So this is a malaise and it needs to be addressed. This is significantly self-defeating, and we've been doing work with groups of women. It is so sad when you're struggling with the numbers, representation, opportunity already, to have this as another barrier, which just takes the whole movement back. So I couldn't agree with you more, Sonali, when you talk about this. Jay says that I agree with Akhil. I have seen women need to support women comparatively more. Shreya says our culture is also very adverse to the changes that modernization and globalization has brought to our socio-economic conditions. You know, Shreya, I mean, we should do a masterclass on just this. So this is a very pertinent point that you're raising here. Jill is saying women still have to choose between career and family, or navigate both, or sacrifice. Men do not. Until workplaces and homes become places that don't punish mothers and fathers are expected to co-parent equally, we won't see as many women in top roles in companies. Very, very relevant point. This requires a lot of support and a lot of sacrifice and a lot of, especially, the whole intervention of men as diversity partners is about that, and it starts from home. So good point there, Jill. Deepak Barara is saying women empowerment is a facade and good to have and talk, but in reality, the enabling environment is absent and leaders are not doing enough. There is no focus on this agenda. Thank you, Deepak, for raising this. Thank you for a very honest comment here. Many people here agreeing with both Akhil and with Jill. Tejal saying limitations of women are one of the major blocks. More collaboration is required among them themselves. Shreya saying, and contrary to popular belief, men don't realize that patriarchy is hurting their agency as well. I think this is the blind spot that could help unite all against this persisting culture of oppression. Couldn't agree with you more. Gauri is saying, I think it's a very unique situation in our country that women are going back or giving up higher positions over family stability. It's time to recognize that she's the boss of the family. Nalini is saying, this has been my nagging cues for long now. Why do we equate empowering with working women? They can wield lots of power otherwise also. Also that women's responsibility on all this. How do mothers bring up boys? What do women do to help tackle this problem? So nagging question for long now. Why do we equate empowering with working women? Very good point. And you know, even if we did bring in some of the working women perspective, because we do have heads of diversity and inclusion from organizations, couldn't agree with you more. You in fact don't even need to be an educator to be empowered. So you don't have to be educated, you don't have to be employed, and you could yet be very empowered. And a lot of our outreach programs are to reach out to women like that, to be able to enable them to find their own empowerment and you know, their own presence, their own identity. And we'd be amazed how many of them already have that. And so they could be very, very considerably empowered, even if not educated and employed. Couldn't agree with you more. We've got Rajesh who responded. We've got Vaijanti saying work from home has created opportunities, but without domestic help, it's a big challenge. Thank you for raising this, Vaijanti. This has been a pain point for so many women, but I think it's going to improve over a period of time as some of the societies start allowing for house help to be able to become available to women again. Sharvani is saying, I belong to the teaching fraternity and it's practically women populated. We are witnessing what Sujaya has mentioned, which is, you know, a lot of optics of just seeing women all the time. We have Shreya saying these are traditionalists who believe that women need to be restricted and protected because they are loved, and they have even gone as far as equating it to the treatment of children, which is so true. In fact, Shreya, you've hit upon a very important point, which is in our society, it's not uncommon to be able to, one of the challenges we have with equality of women is because we treat them like children. And even in the workplace, one of the challenges that we have with the underconfidence that we talk about is also about not seeing yourself as an equal to men. I'll give you all a splendid story, and we'll probably take one comment each from everyone and try and close out the conversation. You know, I have an incredible story. I'm talking about 2015, which is when you needed, you know, there was a regulation to have women being represented on boards. And, you know, we had a very senior woman leader within our organization, one of my previous organizations, and she was heading taxation for the organization. And the decision was, why don't we have her represent one of our premier organizations? So we got her on the board. She attended the first meeting, she attended the second meeting. In the third meeting, we had the CEO of the organization reach out to us asking, you know, have you all spoken to her on how it is that she's feeling about being on the board? Because she never ever speaks. She never makes a single point. She's just quiet through the meeting. She signs whatever papers we ask her to sign at the end, and she leaves. And we were really perturbed, so we reached out to her to ask her what the problem was. And she said that, you know, they all talk in such animated voices. And, you know, they're also excited about things, and then they raise their voices with their excitement. And the rest, I just find myself clamming in because I'm just not used to speaking up when there are so many men in the room. She was the only female in the room. When there's so many men in the room and they all have something really pertinent to say, and all of them have these loud baritone voices. And she said, you know, I belong to a conservative South Indian family. In our home, we were not allowed to speak as women if the men were really agitated or angry about something. And it's really amazing how the patriarchy plays out in different ways. This was a person with 25 plus years of experience, couldn't open up and couldn't make her presence felt in a boardroom. And you know, every organization is peppered with stories such as these. And I think that's part of the reason why we brought up this conversation. And I'm so glad we've got just so many rich perspectives on the challenge of women equality and the journey within patriarchies. Let me try and quickly bring this conversation to a closure by being able to have each one of you make one comment each on, you know, what are you left with? What is the key idea you want to leave the audience with? Even as we talk about the journey of equality and women, you know, in a larger, in a macro context, which is clearly patriarchal. By the way, we are not the only patriarchal country in the world. There are lots and lots of developed worlds which are also patriarchal, and they have similar kind of challenges. It doesn't make our challenge any better, but just to let you know that this is a common challenge across the world. And many women have surmounted this and are ahead in the game, and I think there's so much to learn from them. So I'm going to leave this conversation today. And 90 minutes is never enough for something which is as vast as this. But I want one comment each from each one of you for the audience. So we'll start with you, Priyanka.
Okay. Yes, so I think a large part of my comment is possibly in the film itself that I made. But I think what I would say is that, there is a lot of conversation around this and a lot of literature around these themes, which can possibly get quite overwhelming at a point. So I think what could really help any woman is to just look at herself as an individual and to not look at herself as a gender, and to not make every issue gendered, because it starts with her own head and the way she thinks. And I think in our society, I actually don't think Indians are very confrontational. So if you actually decide that this is the particular approach you're going to take, and for yourself and your mind and you have a plan, people are not very likely to come in your way. But I think that itself is something that we don't have the confidence to do very often. So I think maybe I just start with that.
Well said. Very well said. Akhil, can we get your last comment to the comments? To
I would have a word for this lady that you mentioned who said that, I've been brought up in a conservative background where people don't speak when men are speaking. I spent 2 years in Hindustan. We were in a very remote place called Eta, and there were 275 villages, and I had adopted 2 of them. And I'll give you one example, that this myth that I've been brought up in a culture, I've been surrounded by where women are not treated equally, is a myth. And we also feel that the city-bred, educated, extrovert women are fighting for bra-burning type of agitation. That is also a myth. I saw this. We were doing a lot of work around artificial insemination. And the men would sit around on charpai smoking hookah, looking very macho. And the woman would stand at the doorway, half covering herself with the curtain. But the crux was that when a decision was taken whether the family cows should be subjected to artificial insemination, the men would all talk big. But at the end, they would ask the woman, so-and-so ki ma, what is your opinion? And if she says, Ke Maiya ko abhi nahi dukh dena hai, I don't want to trouble Maiya, you can keep on having a mature talk, you can keep on smoking your hookah and say you are a man in the house and calling the shots. It's a myth. It's the women who actually have to take up the call. They have opportunities, they who back out. So in villages where we think that village women are all very docile, very submissive, it is exactly opposite. And that exactly should apply to the city women also. You cannot hide behind a curtain to say the society, my family brought me up wrong. This is the time has gone to blame the society in the past. Blame yourself if you can't succeed as a woman. I feel very strong about this, Sujaya, because
No, I hear you. I mean, I'm sure there'll be people in the audience. Akhil, I think there will be people in the audience who want to feel a little irked if you said that the concept of inequality for women is a myth. But I get the spirit of what you're saying, which is that there is as much. You could be in a very disempowering situation in a village where you're uneducated, you have a child marriage, you're hidden behind a parda, and you could still be the person who's influencing the decisions within the family. Absolutely. And you could still be the person who's extremely empowered in the way in which you make your presence felt, or you influence what happens to people who you care about. So I think it's a very pertinent point.
It's up to the women.
What do you accept? Do you accept to get subjugated to inequality, or do you come out of that to be able to? So I did get your point. Yeah. Okay, great. Rajesh, can we have your last few comments?
Yes. So I'll make it just 3 sentences. First is that I think Gandhiji said that India's economy is rural. And at the heart of every home is a woman. She's the one who will make the right choices, and she's the one who will decide how money is spent. I think it still applies today. We must not limit ourselves to thinking that women are only in corporates, working women I'm talking about. That's
yeah.
So there's a lot
very good point.
can contribute phenomenally by being entrepreneurial, and they are. I truly believe women are extremely entrepreneurial. I've seen it all along. That's number one. And number two, I feel it is time that we look at, working with women leaders with a Indian viewpoint. We've done it with a couple of organizations. Jay is here. He could speak a lot about that. So I feel when we change the lens a little bit to looking at not just men and women, men or women, like Priyanka said, it's about, doing, having the right competencies for performing roles, right? And each should be educated about the capacities of both, because I feel it's finally male and female energies, which we haven't understood very well. So if we change the lens a little bit and stop looking at things only from a modern worldview, if not Western, we may actually get a lot of ideas. Yes, that's my little point.
Great point, Rajesh. Thank you for that. Shinam, can we bring you in?
Sure, Sujaya, and I'm going to be as controversial as Akhil was. I think I agree with him. Okay, I think the fact that we don't get equality is because we don't demand it. And the day we start demanding equality, nobody's going to say no, right? I was reading some of the comments, and I think Vajanti posted that I have been very comfortable being a single woman in a boardroom. I too have been, right? I remember going on an offsite in my first company when I was like 12 years in the industry. There were 40 or 50 of us, and I was the only woman. And the lady at the resort, she asked somebody who was much senior to me, so why do you have only one woman? That was the first time I felt I was a woman in that crowd. It never, ever occurred to me that I was different, right? I was delivering.
And Shinam, I'm just going to interrupt to say that that kudos and credit to your male colleagues.
Yes. And also the fact that, if you demand the right things, it'll come to you. And I'll give you some examples from my own career, right? When my son was born, we were in a situation where we were needing to work 7 days a week. And my manager, in very good way, came and told me, you don't need to do this. And I said, why? Will I turn around and tell you don't need to give me a promotion when I need to get it? I won't. So I will do my bit, right? So if as a woman, you do your bit and you demand fairness, you will get it. But if you say that, I am a woman and therefore I need special treatment, or I need,
privileges.
I need privileges, or I may not be able to do something, then the world around you is going to treat you differently.
Yes.
Right? So I think my sense and my advice to anybody who would want a career in any field, as a woman, figure out what you want and go out and get it.
Well said, Shinam. Well said. Okay, with that, Pratima, last comments for the audience.
Sure. So, quick couple of sentences. I totally agree with Shinam. Express yourself the way you would want to express yourself. Don't get governed by what the society expects. Make the choices that align with your goals, whatever it could be, corporate, non-corporate. And of course, for that, you please build your allies, yourself and your women fraternity. That's
Lovely. Thank you. Well said. Asu, last but not the least, yeah? So tell us, we leave the last words with Asu. Yeah, please tell us.
I would just like to, go back to the film. That's where we started. All the women in the room, all different kind of women in the room. And I would, like everybody to imagine this global population of women all across the world in different fields or different situations, different kind of challenges, different kind of privilege. Everyone at the global level, all women coming together and do a better job at this game now. I think everybody understands that there are things that we do better. There is a different way of managing things at home, at work, everything. And I think this is now becoming a more and more established fact that we are no lesser, we are different, but no lesser. And I think it's time to kind of rise up to the challenge, take control, and run the world the way that it should be run.
Yeah.